If you want to 10x your finances and business, you have to reimagine what your floor is. Dr. Benjamin Hardy is one of my favorite authors, and I credit him with a lot of my finance growth and business growth from the books that he has written. The most successful people don't have higher ceilings or potential. They craft their day in a way that makes it so their floor or their worst days never compound. The highest achieving people understand exactly how to do this, and in this podcast, we're going to talk through practical ways you can make sure that you're scaling your finances and business. By the end of this episode, your mindset will be completely changed. I'm not one that's huge on mindset and running through brick walls, but this conversation I had with Dr. Benjamin Hardy is one of my favorite that I've ever had. It's good to have you here. This is one of those full circle moments for me. You're one of my, I talk about you all the time when I say favorite books. You're one of my favorite authors. And so it's going to be fun to do a deep dive here for probably the next 30, 40, 50 minutes and talk about, you have a new book coming out. When's the official release date of your new book?
Actually comes out in a week from when you and I are talking. Comes out July 29th.
Yep. So by the time this is released, it'll be right around then, which is awesome. So I'm excited to kind of dive into it. But before we dive into the actual book and concepts and stuff, because we'll spend a lot of time there, walk us through your history a little bit. What did you graduate in and how'd you get into writing?
So I studied what's called theoretical psychology in my undergrad, BYU.
Yep.
I think that's where you shot some hoops, right?
Yep. I played ball there.
I know. Impressive stuff, dude. So I did theoretical psychology in my undergrad, and then I did what's called organizational psychology for a master's and PhD at Clemson University.
And did you always knew you wanted to get into writing?
No. I was serving a church mission, got super into journaling, and just wrote volumes of journals. And I was mostly doing it as a therapeutic practice.
Yeah.
I had a pretty troubled childhood. And so, but also just learning to write. I was reading tons of books during that time, and just my mind was transformed, and I just fell in love with the act of writing and began to visualize myself as a writer. And so when I came home, I wanted to be a writer. I just didn't know what form.
Yeah.
I wasn't super into business at that time. I wanted to study psychology, human change, human growth. And then during my undergrad, I got very into entrepreneurship and leadership development. So that's when I went to business psychology and shifted to focusing on entrepreneurs.
And then originally you jumped into Medium articles, correct? Is that kind of where you got your start?
Yeah. So I wanted to, this kind of fits with just the idea of 10X or impossible goals.
Yeah.
Before, I was a foster parent of 3 kids. So when I was in my PhD program, first year, me and my wife got 3 kids, foster kids.
Jeez.
And so I was doing a PhD program, 3 foster kids, first time parent, gnarly situation. And with all PhD programs, usually you're working on campus. Like you're doing like a university position and then they pay for your tuition.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that 20 an hour university position, like being a research assistant, you have to pay your own way. And all PhD students almost notoriously just have that system so that they don't have to have tuition. I really didn't want to do that with my 5 years in a PhD program. I wanted to become a professional author. And from my view, I wanted to get with one of the major publishers. And so rather than just having say a goal of writing a book, my goal was actually I want to get a 6-figure book deal. And so I didn't know that was the 1% of 1% of book deals, but that was kind of like the 10X goal.
Yep.
And so with that goal, there was just very few paths to getting there. And so it led me to finding a great platform, which at the time was Medium, which was a place I could write and capture emails. That platform's not very solid anymore. But also I'm not filtering for that kind of goal anymore.
Yep.
But yeah, so I wanted to get a 6-figure book deal, and I knew I needed to get 100,000 emails to do that. And so Medium was just a phenomenal path to getting there. And so it took me about 2 years to just blog and get 100,000 emails and get that book deal.
So smart. I mean, business, writing, wherever you are, influence is so powerful today.
It is.
You always hear that. I had no idea what that meant until I started social media, and I had no intention of growing on social. I honestly hate social media. I say that constantly. It's not what I like. But I started posting online, and once you get an audience, businesses are now created around audiences.
Oh, yeah.
And so the fact that you had the foresight to understand that and do it is massive, because once you have an email list, once you have an audience, once you have influence, whatever it is, the platform is, your world opens up. You can go write those deals. You can get those deals, because you can have the best thoughts in the world, but if you can't disseminate the information, you'll never actually get there. So well done. I mean, ahead of your time to actually go get that influence. That's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
And so you grow this massive audience, and then what's the first book you write?
So I wrote around that time, I wrote an ebook actually called Slipstream Time Hacking, which is really, it's a individual book on how to make fast progress, right?
Cool.
This was in 2015, but the first published book, like the first traditionally published book, was called Willpower Doesn't Work. And so this was in 2018. I was still in my PhD program, And then a couple years later, I had 2 books come out in 2020, Personalities and Permanent, and then Who Not How, my first book with Dan Sullivan.
Dang. It's been a wild ride. I didn't realize it was that quick. You've released a lot of books in the last 5 years.
Yeah. So in the last 5 years, I've released, I think, 6.
Dang. That's crazy. So you're in your PhD, 3 foster kids.
Yeah.
I've actually heard your story before. And then you have some of your own, right?
Yeah. Well, so what happened was when you have foster kids, you can't leave the state. Right. And so we had 3 foster kids. I was still doing PhD, but I had finished all coursework, all the big tests, but I had not finished the dissertation. And there's no deadline on dissertations, but we were staying in South Carolina, Clemson, because we couldn't leave.
Yeah.
Until we adopted the kids, because the kids were technically the like wardens of the state.
Mm-hmm.
So once we were granted adoption, my wife's a huge Disney buff. And so we're just like, all right, Ben's not done with the dissertation, but we're going to move to Florida now because we don't want to live in this small, Clemson's like a tiny podunk town, honestly. So we moved to Orlando. And my wife got pregnant a month after the adoption. Jeez. So she got pregnant with twins the month after the adoption. We moved to Florida, and then we got 2 more kids. And then we've now since, we're at 7 now. So.
Holy cow. Good on you. Me and my wife have had a heck of a journey with children as well. We looked into foster forever. We ultimately didn't go through with it. We've done natural, IVF, and eventually surrogacy. But anyone goes through any of that journey, I have so much respect for.
It's a long journey.
It's a long journey with a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, especially with, the wife and her emotions through all of it. We did fertility treatments for like 5 years, all of it up to IVF, and then multiple IVF rounds, and then just bang, it happened. So
had twins.
Yeah.
Dang.
So where are you at with it now, by the way? If you don't mind asking?
So we had 1 miscarriage, and then we ended up having Talmadge naturally. Our oldest, he's now 6. And then in between Talmadge and Beckham, we had 7 miscarriages. And so we went into IVF as well. And Beckham is an IVF baby. And then on both births, my wife ended up bleeding out. And so she coded on the second one. And so we decided we were done having kids, obviously. Like when they turn and look at you and say wife or kid, it's like both, no option there. But we still had embryos from IVF. And so that's when we were sitting there deciding, do we go adoption? Do we go foster? We already have the embryos. Do we just go surrogacy? And ultimately, we decided to go surrogacy. So we just had a baby girl, Charlotte. She's 4 months old from surrogacy. So we've done all 3 in the last about 6 years.
Dude.
So
amazing, brother.
Yeah, it's a
what a
heck
journey.
Of a journey. Everyone has their journey. Everyone has their story. Some of them are more public than others. But I have a lot of respect that goes for anyone that goes through any of it. So that's cool. Okay, so I want to fast forward a little bit and focus on this book. I've read every one of your books. You're phenomenal. This is the one that I thought, the reason I think I like this one so much is some of the other ones were so topic specific, phenomenal books. Like I'll tell my team this, 10X's and 2X and Who Not How was what allowed me to go from owning 1 company to 20 companies and build the systems and infrastructure that I have. And so incredible books. But this is the first one I felt like you went beginning to end with scaling. It was not just a specific topic on hiring or mindset or anything. This was a holistic approach. Is that how you kind of approached this book? Was that the thought process on it?
It was. Yeah, and it was so much harder as a result.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It was halfway through writing this, I didn't know if I could pull it off.
Really?
And we'll see. With time, we'll tell. But yeah, it was like, I remember presenting the concept to the editor, and she was just like, this is too ambitious of a book. Like, this is way too ambitious. You're trying to eat too big of an apple or whatever,
Yeah.
But I wanted to try to complete a new thought. And so, and in other words, create a framework, a new frame of thinking about a very trendy topic, just complete new frame. And so that was the attempt.
Well, you nailed it. So inside of it, the first section, I saw a lot of 10X's and 2X in that first section.
For sure.
Setting impossible goals. And when you're writing that book, what is like the biggest takeaway if you were to summarize why you decided to start with that? Because I thought that was interesting. My favorite part was probably the middle section. Why did you decide to start with setting impossible goals inside this book?
It really comes down to so in the appendix of the book, which really explains my philosophy of time and how time works psychologically, I tried so hard to have that be in the front of the book, and everyone hated it. And so I couldn't leave the core theory out.
Yep.
But really, from a deep psychology standpoint, as human beings, we're all driven by goals. And this is something that's really misunderstood by people. It's really misunderstood in pop culture. I think the best example I generally give to people is Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know if you've ever read that one.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is a must-read book. It's considered like one of the best 100 books written in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it at least?
Yes, I have heard of it.
Yeah. So the reason I bring it up is Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist during the concentration camps. And I only bring this up because he explains the core psychology as well, although it's very misunderstood. But he was in a concentration camp. He's with people who have had their whole lives taken away from them. They've had everything taken away from them. He himself, his wife was pregnant, was killed. His parents were put in gas chambers. Like, these people lose everything, right? And so he explains the psychology of the concentration camp. Like with the Nazis screaming at you in the face, just to scare you, shooting the guy in the head next to you. Like, you just get desensitized to everything.
Yeah.
Everything's numb. You've lost everything. And essentially what happens for most people in those conditions is because they don't know if they're going to die tomorrow and there's no end in sight, all of a sudden they lose hope that there's anything beyond the concentration camps. Mm-hmm. And so what he writes about in that book is that once a person loses hope in the future, their present completely shuts down. And they completely shut down, and then they become retrospective in those conditions. They start wishing things were in the past, and ultimately in such dire conditions, they just die fast. Other people, in our very luxurious world, they can lose hope in the future and just become really depressed and mute and just sit on social media all day. But the main thing there is that basically what Frankl said is the only way for a person to gain inner strength inside this terrible concentration camp is they have to first have a goal. Until they have a goal for their future, they're hosed. And so like that's how I see psychology is that our goals as people shape who we are in the present. How we frame our future, how we view our future is fundamentally the driving force. Of course, our past impacts us big time, but the future is the dominant force in who we are today. And even more directly, our goals. Our goals are what drive who we are today. And so the idea of impossible goals is a really useful tool when you understand what we call in psychology pathways thinking. Just the idea that every goal starts creating paths, right? If I want to go from $1 million in my business to 2 million, there's some paths to getting there in 1 year. So if I want to get from 1 million to 2 million in a year, there's some paths. But if I want to go from 1 million to 10 million in a year, my 2 million path no longer works. And so the goal shapes the path. And so naturally with impossible goals, first off, you don't know the path. That's the first beauty. Yep. Is that you set a goal and now you don't know the path. So now you're no longer operating off your past assumptions. And then it just forces you, as you begin to understand this philosophy more, it forces you to just go find the best path, the best partners. It forces you into a who, not how mentality. Yep. It forces you out of thinking that you have to do it all yourself. So going for impossible goals is just a really good starting point for good strategy.
And I feel like every single time I've gone through this, and I go, what I love about this book is I read it, I own businesses, I read it from a business mind. It has so many implications to every form of your life, from fitness to personal to spiritual to mental health to whatever it is, it fits in there. But as I'm going through this, oftentimes when I have to set that goal, it's a more simplistic way of 10xing than it is to get to the 2 million. To 2 million, I'm like, well, I have to do this and this and this and this. And you're just magnifying everything you're doing. Or when you can just blow it all up and say, well, that doesn't work. How do I get there? And all of a sudden it becomes one clear path. And that, when you look at the biggest businesses, simplicity scales. You look at some of these businesses, I mean, let's go in and out, Chick-fil-A, like from food to anything, they have their business model that is extremely simplistic and they scale it like crazy. And setting that impossible goal allows you to do that on a personal level. And that's why I think it resonates so much with me.
Yeah. You have to, one of the reasons I like it is that when you set such a lofty goal and how I look at it, and a lot of people I think mess up goals. They like one of the first reactions that I always get because I'm on stages and I present this. Yeah. One of the first reactions is always, why would I set a goal that I don't think I'm going to hit, and therefore I'm going to set myself up and everyone for disappointment, right? And the main thing I say here is my view of the future as a concept, and I'm talking about my future, your future, psychology of the future. The future is a tool for shaping how I make choices in the present. And so the goals I have shape basically what I'm looking for, signal and noise, right? I'm looking for signals that are going to help me get to my goal. And so I don't look at the goal as something that determines if I'm a successful person. I don't use the goal as something that makes me feel like a winner or a loser. I don't use it to make me feel worthy or unworthy. I don't care if I do want to hit it, trust me. But as a starting point, I use the goal as a tool. And so if I set this goal super high, again, I'm at 1 million, rather than going for 2, I'm going for 10 this year. I'm going to use that as a tool, not as something to get emotional about. I'm going to say, if I'm going for 10 million this year, let's just look at everything we're doing now, because it's just a tool to look at the present and say, nothing I'm doing right now is going to get me to 10 million right now. So now I can start actually thinking, first off, I can then reanalyze what I'm doing right now. How much of this stuff even really matters? Why am I doing all this stuff in the first place? But second, if I am going to get there, and if I'm operating from that goal, what would need to be true? What are some of the pathways I would need to take? What would that model have? Now I'm starting to operate differently. Now I'm using a different future to begin shaping my pathways thinking. And when you get good at that skill, you can start quickly finding really phenomenal paths, really phenomenal partners, and you can start operating from much higher principles than if you were just, the general linear approach is just saying, this is where we were. I did 2 million last year. Let's go for 3 million this year. Like, it's just like, let's just keep doing what we're doing.
Yep.
And that doesn't lead to good strategy.
I think also one of my favorite things about all your books, I don't love motivation books.
I don't either.
I've got enough motivation to go run through the brick wall. Just show me how to run through it.
Yeah.
Like, I want practical steps, facts. And I feel like this does it well. And one thing that clicked, I think you said it in this one, everyone has goals, whether they're written down and they realize what it is a whole nother idea. But what you do every single day tells me what your goals are. Now,
100%.
whether you're meaningfully setting those goals or not is a whole nother conversation. But it drives me nuts how many people say they don't believe in goals, or they don't have goals, or they set 3 goals a year or whatever it is. Every action you take in the day is leading towards some goal, written or unwritten. And it's up to you to decide whether you want to dictate your journey and your future, use it as a tool or not. But so many people just open their phone whenever they're bored and get to social media, or say, I'll work out tomorrow. They let their emotions dictate what they do every single day, when that is telling me what your goal is.
Totally. Your goal is to be comfortable. Your goal is to sit on social media. Admittedly, you're choosing that over something better.
Yep.
And so I appreciate that philosophy too, because I believe in human agency. And so I love the knowledge. The hard part is it puts a lot of responsibility on me.
It does.
It puts the spotlight on me to say, I'm not off the hook because I know that what I'm doing is based on my goals. And so then I have to just say, if my goal is just to chill, I mean, and sometimes recovery is phenomenal, but
yeah.
I'm a big believer that whatever people are doing, whatever their process is, whether they're honest with themselves, whether they know it or not, they're trying to accomplish something.
Yep. And this is going to segue us into another part. We're going to jump there just because I think we're heading that direction. I believe in agency as well. And I believe that everyone has the same potential innately. Now, I'm not going to take away that some people have an easier path getting to that potential, okay? Some people are born into opportunities that other people aren't born into.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm never going to take that away from anyone. But I do believe that everyone has the opportunity, no matter how hard the path is. You jump into this concept that I've actually never heard before. In my business, we've called it a standard of excellence, or a standard in which we hold in our business. You call it a floor. And that, I don't know why, it's the same general principle, but just the way that you worded in there opened my eyes a little bit more, in that what they accomplish in their life is not a measure of their potential. What they accomplish in their life is actually a measure of how low they allow their floor to be.
Of course.
And that concept blew my mind. And I think I told you when you walked in the room, that was my favorite takeaway from this book. Because I was like, I've never heard it worded that way. And that's such an easy way to communicate that. Was that a you just brainchild one day, like looking at a whiteboard? Where did you come up with that? What are your thoughts around the floor?
The floor is such a big concept. I mean, even what we just explained is what I call the frame, which is that the goal shapes the path, the goal shapes everything, but the goal also shapes the floor, right? And when you have a bigger goal, you have to have a higher floor, which is just basically, so it's such a big concept. It took me a lot of time to realize how big it was, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
To your point, it's not about a person's ceiling, right? A person's floor is shown all the time. So just as an example, I'll be working with a business owner, right? And he'll come up with some 10 times bigger vision or something like that, but he can't say no to the quick money opportunities right now, right? So that's his floor, right? Even though he knows by continuing to say yes to those things, he's not going down the harder but much higher path. And so the floor, as I define it, is it's the dividing line between what you say yes and no to, but more specifically, your floor says what you say no to. And so you can know if something's below your floor if you're actually willing to say no to it. And a lot of really deep thought goes into that. Like even Steve Jobs said, focus is what you say no to, right? He said innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. And then I began really studying strategy. And Michael Porter, who invented the field of competitive strategy, said strategy is essentially what you say no to. right? So good strategy always starts with no, right? And it takes you down a very focused path, right? But yeah, the floor. I'm big into sports, and I actually am big into basketball. To be honest with you, I love basketball, particularly the NBA, and so I studied the floor from a sports perspective because I've actually worked with professional athletes, and I'm always interested in people who go from one level to the next, college to pro, right? And most people don't make the jump. Most people, when they go from college to pro, they don't get to the top of pro, right? Yeah. And so when you study the Currys, right, Steph Curry or others, Steph Curry's floor is so high. Very few games he's going to make less than 20 points, right? Most other players, they might get up there once every 10, 20 games. Mm-hmm. Very rarely is he going to go below that, right? He's not going to go below that. And so the floor is really the thing that separates. And one of my favorite quotes is that amateurs can get something right once, pros do something until they don't get it wrong, right? That's just the key is when you get to the pro level, your floor has to be very high. You have to let go of a lot of the stuff that was acceptable before. You have to let go of a lot of things to get to a level of mastery. You can't, a lot of things are just not acceptable, and the no's get big. Yep. They really test you on some of the no's because you just have to accept the opportunity cost of going below the floor. My view is when you go below the floor and you say yes to something that is okay, good, not great, it costs you so big on the ceiling side because you're just accepting something that you just don't really realize how big the cost is.
I almost wish I had a whiteboard in here because I was sitting down with a really good friend and employee the other day, and we coach constantly in our business. If we're not coaching our employees, we're not helping them. And so I was walking him through the last 60 days, and I was like, your floor is dropped. And so I drew this, and here's your potential, here's your floor. And every single time you choose to bring it down to that floor, that shows you where you're going to be. And we were talking about a personal life. I was true. The stuff that you do in your personal life will raise that floor slowly. And the most successful people, ceiling's at the exact same spot. They just bring their floor so far up there that they live in this top range.
They live in the ceiling.
They live up there, and everyone's like, oh, they're lucky or they've got so much more potential. I'm like, no, they just don't allow their emotions and their day-to-day actions to dip below an insanely high floor. And it's not like one day it just gets up there. They chose to eat right. They chose to work out. They chose to put systems and processes and KPIs and surround themselves with people and take care of themselves financially and mental health and everything else. And eventually, through all these tiny steps, their floor is just so high that they just are sitting up here. And eventually, after a year of that, everyone looks around like they're so lucky, they're so successful. It's like, you don't understand. It took years and years of self-discipline to raise that floor incrementally until you get to a point, until you get to those Currys. And he is just living at a whole nother level because he's allowed that floor to slowly raise. And it's in business, it's in personal, it's everywhere. It's a concept that I think will change people's lives. And I think that was probably my favorite part of this entire book.
I appreciate that, man. One thing that I want to say about the floor that I think is interesting from a good versus great, because I really look at it as until you raise the floor and start stripping stuff out, you won't become great. But I was talking to a guy who runs a private equity firm. So they invest in companies. Yep. And I was saying, what's the range of the companies that you invest in, right? What is their revenue or something like that? Yeah. And we looked at his most profitable deals because they actually buy into companies and then help them scale. And he said, our best ones are always above 10 million. They're doing over 10 million revenue. We invest in them and then boom. And I'm like, but how many of your companies that you invest in are above 10 million? He's like, maybe 2 out of 10. I said, so 80% of the companies you invest in are below that. How many of those really work out? He said, the upside of those is way smaller. I'm like, what would happen if you just made your floor 10 million? What if you didn't accept anything below that? You just said, we no longer take deals below 10 million, and you actually optimized for that. Because right now, 2 out of 10. You see a lot more deals down here. You see a lot more of the $1 or $2 million, but that's because you're still filtering for them.
Yep.
You're still fishing for them if you're a fisherman, right? And so you want to stop fishing for those. You want to set a hard floor and say, we no longer do that. Yes, now let's go disappoint the marketplace. Let's go disappoint our clients. Let's go let go of some of our team members who are optimized for that and say, we don't do this anymore. And so once you set that hard floor, you say, we only do these deals. Then you can actually start to tune your filter to that and start realizing, oh, those deals are all over the place. I just was not looking for them, but you also can develop mastery at that level. So, but when I told this to that guy, he was just like, and he's been in business for like 45 years. Like they have a long-standing firm, and I'm like, dude, your floor is so low. I'm like, why would you keep accepting all these good but not great deals? You've not developed mastery at the level of the deals you're already getting, and the ones you said are already super profitable. Why don't you just make that the floor and not do anymore? And I was like, how long would it take you? This is always a question I say is, how long would it take you to normalize if you set the floor and let go of that?
Yep.
Because that stresses people out. They're like, well, that's kind of our cash flow. Like we need that stuff, right? And yes, it's a short-term loss. You have to take that short-term loss to raise your floor. Every time, by the way.
Yep.
Every time you raise your floor, it's a short-term loss. Even if it's overcoming a bad habit, there's a short-term loss.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's painful.
Yep.
I really look at raising the floor as letting go of your past self. Like you're walking away from your past self because your floor was your past self. And when you raise the floor and you're walking away from your past self, you're now operating from the future. And you're saying you're walking away from the aspects of your past self that are now holding you back from reaching a new level of mastery or a new level of excellence. And so it's really just the walking away. But if you actually set the floor, hold it, keep it, commit to it, and actually just offload the stuff that's now below the floor, my experience is always less than a year that you now master the new level and you start just kicking it at the new compounding level. Like you can get there fast. It's really just figuring out how to bridge that gap of letting go of the old floor and the old habits or the old system and beginning to master the new.
I love it. So you said what you wanted to start the book with was your concept of time.
Yes.
Walk me through what is your concept of time and why did you want to start the book there?
So this is foundational psychology, right? I've already talked a little bit about it, but past, present, future,
Yep.
right? Past, present, future are concepts. When we're talking about time on a clock, that's something totally different, right? When we're talking about physics even, although physics, there's a lot of philosophy on time, of course,
Yep.
right? Einstein and whatnot. But when I'm talking about the psychology of time, I have a view of my past. I have a view of my future. And those two things are what we call the context that shapes who I am today. So the way anyone who's listening to this podcast, they're interpreting this podcast through their past and future.
Mm-hmm.
But the really big implication and why I brought up Frankl and a lot of modern neuroscience and positive psychology is we've really come to realize that the future is 10 times the tool of the past. The past is incredible. It's very important to know about my past, but the past isn't the driver, although most people use it as the driver.
Yep.
Most people use the past as the driver and the explainer. Why am I the way I am? Because of my past. Why do I do what I do? Because of my past, right? The past should never be the driver nor the explainer. The past should be the lesson giver, right? The past is what I keep learning lessons from. Through successes and failures, I learn lessons from those so I don't have to repeat them. But it's the future that drives everything. And even what has been taught in positive psychology is that we really don't think about the past very much just for thinking about the past. We usually think about the past in reference to what we'll do in the future. It's a tool for even thinking about our future. But the main thing here with time psychologically is that both of these are psychological tools for operating in the present. If I go through a traumatic experience as a child, which I have and which most people have gone through, hearing about your journey, as a parent, we go through these things and they absolutely can be devastating and they can cripple us in the present and cripple our future. That's what trauma is when you go through something painful and you let it drive you.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing here is the linear view of time and the very slow growing way that people approach time is they say that my past determines my present, and then because I'm here, I'm going to use my present to shape my future, right? And so the future is up ahead and it's very weak, but it's usually just a continuation of where you're at in the present. That's linear time. What I call holistic time is recognizing that these are just tools. The past is a tool, and I can frame and reframe it over and over and over again. You can frame and think about from a ton of different angles all your experiences having kids. And so it's really the future that shapes who you are in the present. That's the main thing here, is that the future is the primary tool that shapes our present, and it's us in the present that has to take responsibility for how we frame our past. Like this is just the key to just knowing that these things are all happening right now and they're tools. And I can use these tools at will, but they're really there for helping me operate in the present. So as I take more and more responsibility for my past in the present, I'm less impacted by it. In fact, I can move on from it and I can be grateful for it and I can be happy for it. But then I can use the more powerful tool, which is the future, and just say this tool, this future, is shaping everything about who I am today. It's shaping my direction. It's shaping what I say yes and no to. It's shaping my friends. It's shaping my choices. And so if I change my future, immediately in my present will begin to change.
And I think you also can use the future time and condense it to change it even more.
That's the biggie.
And so you set this impossible goal. We already talked about that, going from 2 million to 10 million. You're like, okay, I'll get to 10 million. I think I can do that. Let's say 5 to 7 years. And then you just ask that question, what if I had to do it in 1 year?
Exactly.
What if you condensed it down? Once again, it takes that impossible goal a whole nother step forward where we already blew it up once and figured out the singular path. And then we're like, it'll take me 5, 7, 10 years. And they're like, well, what if it took me 1? And it blows it up again and forces you to reimagine what it is again. And that time, once again, turns into a tool because it forces you out of habits and comfort zones into something that you can actionably do and change your life for the better. And so time, yes, gives you direction, but it also is a tool where you can condense and bring your goals closer to you just because you blow everything else up.
Yeah, this is so big. Yeah. So the future as a general concept is big, and what that future looks like, your goal. The timeline is the second piece of this powerful concept of impossible goals, because the impossible goal is really two things. It's the scale of the goal and it's the timeline, right? You could take a massive goal that's freaking huge, but 10 years away, and it's actually a pretty doable goal because it's 10 years away, and you move it now to 2 years, now it's an impossible goal. Yep. But by doing that, you're forced to rethink your path. You're forced to question all the things you thought were required on your 10-year path and realize most of them are nonsense. Yeah. Your 10-year path has a lot of bad ideas in it. And when you go for it in 2, it cuts out all that noise, all those false ideas, and it says, no, what's the real thing you have to do? We call that the crux in strategy psychology. But what's the actual crux we have to solve? And what I found in working with businesses is any business with a 10-year goal is not actually solving that goal. Yeah. So a company doing 10 million but wants to get to 100 million in 10 years, they're not solving how do I build a $100 million company. They're solving how do I get to 12 million. Yep. And so they're making $12 million decisions, not $100 million decisions, because that future's too far away. Therefore, it's not a powerful enough tool to shape what they do in the present. So whenever I work with someone, it's like we always move their 10-year goals to 2 or 3, and now we say, what's actually required? Do we even know what a $100 million company really looks like? Do we even know what we're solving, or are we just solving the next incremental step? We actually applied this ourselves just barely last week in our own company, which was we have our own impossible goal. But in terms of a short-term goal, right? Where do we want to be in the next 6 months? Where do we want to be by the end of 2025? I felt like our goal was too linear. I felt like our short-term goal was too small. And so I said, let's 2x it. Just the goal for this year, right? And all of a sudden we realized all of our systems were broken because we're like, nothing we're doing right now could get us to that number, right? If it's 500 members in our program, well, what if we go for 1,000 this year? It immediately showed us, our CEO was like, I need to hire X, Y, and Z. Like, obviously, but again, it's a tool, right? Now, all of a sudden, he realized we're actually on a bad path. And it brings up a concept that I call like actually in the research on impossible goals, there's a big conversation on a topic called slack. Slack is essentially like margin, right? So if I have a lot of slack, it could be financial slack, it could be time slack, right? And if you don't give yourself slack, especially if you're going for a huge goal that you don't know how to hit, if you're just like riding with no margin, then you're hosed, right? And so you want to build in slack into the system so that you can actually like have flexibility. And so what I realized when we moved our goal, when we doubled our goal just for this year, was we didn't have slack in our system. We need to hire like five dudes over there so that we can actually go through the learning process, so that we can build that slack, so that we can actually go through the learning journey faster. So you really want to build in slack, whether it's, again, to the extent you can get additional resources. The whole point of it is to prepare. Like, you want to be ahead of the game, not behind the game. If you think of it in basketball. Yep. Like, if in basketball you get behind, dude, you're clawing back. And so one of the beauties of like using time as a tool and using the impossible goals is it forces you to start like really building a stress test plan, right? And you're not pushing things off to the future. You're like, oh, I got to solve this thing now because I got to get there in 2 years, not 10. So it forces you to build better systems. It forces you to like solve problems faster. It also will often simplify my system because I have to scale quicker. It has to simplify. You have to simplify the system. If I'm going to onboard 200 people and then I'm like, I'm going to onboard 3, I'm just like, I need 5 more people. Put 5 more guys in there. They can make the 30-minute calls and we can onboard them. Then you're like, I need to onboard 1,000. You're like, I can't get enough butts and seats. Like, so now people isn't the answer. Yeah, now I need a new path. Yep. So are we automating Zoom calls? Are we using AI? What systems? And it ends up simplifying the system, which then in the future, every time you 10x, because hopefully it's not a one-time thing, correct, you now have a system that can continue to scale with you. And so I feel like the system and software, we're kind of building on this whole concept
this simplifying the system is often the path, and we kind of already hit this, to eventually actually lead to 10x. And that's,
you can't do
as
it
a
until you
business
simplify.
owner, that's my favorite part. I want a simple system. I don't want complexity. Complexity kills.
It does.
But we naturally will just complicate and complicate and complicate and complicate, trying to get little increments of success. Where if you can just blow it up and simplify with the end in mind, you end up with a much better system altogether.
Yeah, that's why frame is the starting point, is because having a high frame and impossible goal and scale and timeline forces out those bad ideas. You can't just, hire 1,000 people. You're like, we probably have to find a faster way. We have to find a more digital way or something like that. So it forces out dilution of focus. So often people will have far too many areas of focus. And when you just go for the much bigger goal, it's like we just have to get really good at this. Like we just have to do this. We can't do we have to be the best at this, period. Mm-hmm. And so it forces you to get defined as well. And often people are unwilling to define themselves and they try to be too broad. But if you just say, this is what we do, this is who we do it for, we don't do it for anyone else, now we're defined, and that gets straight to strategy, which is we don't do anything. Like we don't do that.
You're saying no to.
Yeah. So like when you go for the impossible goal, it forces you to find who this is who we are, this is what we do. We do it in these ways that are completely different than anything in the market. Therefore, it becomes good strategy.
Yeah. Okay. As we're I don't want to give everything in the book away because there's so much here and people need to go read it. If you were to summarize what your favorite 2 or 3 points from this book, is there anything we haven't hit on that you wish people would know, or questions they would come into the book thinking about? I feel like the mindset you come into a book will be so much of what you get away from it.
I agree with
what
that.
do you want people asking? What key concepts do you feel like people should become prepared that we haven't hit on thus far?
I think especially with business owners, most of them have really bad beliefs about what scale is. Often they'll think 2x is scale.
Yeah.
It's not. Like I was talking to a guy recently, and he had a great business doing $3 million a year. And he was like, I want to scale. And he thought let's talk about me getting to 5 or 6 million. I was like, no, that's not scale, man. Let's talk about you getting to 100 million. I said, if you want to go to 100 million in the next 3 years, what would you have to do? And all of a sudden he was like, what the beautiful part was when he actually thought about it, he's like, I'd have to go do the thing I really want to do. I'd have to do this. And he's like, I got this revolutionary concept, but I'd have to go all in on it. It's like, would you have to let go of some of the other stuff? Yeah. So I think that the first thing that I want people to realize is when you go for the impossible scale goal, especially in business, right? Businesses are such it's such a fun vehicle because there's so much options and so many different models, so many different vehicles. And so when you start going for scale, 10x, 100x goals, and you give yourself a shorter amount of time, again, as a tool, not to make yourself feel good or bad, not to compare to anyone else, but just use it as a tool to say, what would the path be? What would the model be? How would I have to get there? Once you really start solving that and you then choose to actually do it, commit to it, therefore letting go of the floor, the stuff that's below it. So that's number one, is just I want people to realize setting a high scale goal in your business is the best thing you can do because it will force out all the bad thinking and it'll force you to find the best path and the easiest models.
Yep.
So that's number one. It will make your life easier. To the idea of 10x is easier than 2x. It will make your life so much easier if you actually go for scale. The second thing is it will force you to become the best you can be in business, also in your own skills and abilities. But to the point of innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. If you go for the really high scale goal and you actually apply it, meaning you raise your floor and start stripping out the stuff that's dilution of focus, distraction, and then you actually commit to the focused path, it will force you to become the best in the world at what you do. And you can do that. You can become the absolute best and most defined and most innovative in a particular sector. And you can reinvent a field. You can reinvent a genre. You can change a lot of lives if you choose to get focused. Focus is the key, but it's really about what are you focused on. And so the beauty of going for really high scale and taking it seriously, meaning the floor goes up and you have to really say, I don't know if I can go for all these other things. If you take that thought seriously, it'll lead to you innovating to a level that you take something way farther than anyone else even is thinking about. And if you do that, that's when things like iPhones pop out, and they change the game, right? Yeah. And so going for the real scale and taking the floor seriously it will lead you to innovating at least yourself and your business, but it very likely could change entire fields and industries, and it will make you the best you can be. Like the whole idea of the 10x is easier than 2x, the one idea from that book was you have to remove everything that's not the David and reach a level of refinement that few people will get to. I actually was with a guy yesterday who's a mentor and one of the most refined people I know, like truly refined, but refined in 10x 1,000 times. Like this guy's a billionaire, but truly a refined man, like in his 70s, so sharp. You share something with him, like just, and so spiritual and stuff. And I was just like, I am like dirty water compared to this man, and his, like, he is so refined. And so I just think if you allow the bigger future to shape you, it will refine you in very beautiful ways.
Awesome. So I've got 2 questions I wrote down before we get into kind of the conclusion part of this as I was reading this. So I was simultaneously reading The Gap and the Gain while reading this book.
Interesting. You'd read The Gap and the Gain before, no?
I had, yeah.
Okay.
For a second time through.
Okay,
yes.
interesting.
I had given it to an employee of mine, and when I handed it out, I was like, I'm going to reread this. How do you simultaneously have The Gap and the Gain with an impossible goal?
Beautiful.
And not allow those to compete with each other?
Such a great question, and a question I've gotten many times. It was actually why Dan and I strategically wrote The Gap and the Gain before 10x. So as I said, these are 2 tools. They can simultaneously coexist, right?
Yep.
I can operate from an impossible goal, and I use the future as a tool for what I do. But I can also use the past as a tool for how I measure my progress, right? So I look at the past as the thing I'm using to learn from. It's an amazing tool for learning, right?
Yep.
And I can also appreciate my progress while still operating from my impossible goal. I think what happens with the gap isn't about not having goals. The gap isn't, and this is again, I don't know if this is how Dan thinks about it, but the gap isn't really about not having 10x ambition. It's about not hating yourself because you're not there, right? When you're in the gap, you've made that thing the only thing, and that because you're not there yet, now you're in the gap and now you feel awful. And we do that with everyone. If I'm looking at my son, right, and he's performing in tennis, and I'm like, why aren't you there yet? Like, why aren't you a pro, right? Now I'm using his future against his present, right, rather than using it to guide his present, right? And so I think that both of these are very complementary for me. Like I use my future to shape my present, to filter everything I do. But I am massively empowered when I just look back on the last month. And I'm like, I can't believe how different things are. I'm stunned, right? Both of these things are tools to give me energy in the present. And I think that when I'm in the gap, I've devalued my past because it wasn't what it was supposed to be. I've devalued my present because I'm not where I should be. And now I'm using the future as I'm using it as a trap. I'm using it as kind of a weapon against myself. And so the gap is just a really bad approach, And so I just use these as simultaneous tools.
I love it. I think your goals set direction.
They filter everything.
Sets, I don't want to say self-worth, but sets your ability to measure success. I do these sales seminars. We go city to city. We put about 75 to 100 people in the room. Everyone in there, not everyone, the majority of people in there are millionaires. Like the average net worth of those rooms are always between $3 and $5 million. And for 6 hours, I train on venture capital, private equity, very high level finances. And by the end of it, every single time, I can just see it in their eyes. There's 10 people in the room that just got their minds blown on what can be. And then I throw up the stats of the room, and they feel inadequate because of where they are. And I take 10 minutes to go over the gap and the gain. I said, your mind was just blown. And you have 2 ways you can analyze this. You can either have a little pity party and say, I'm not there. Why was I even in this room? Why haven't I learned this before? Why couldn't I invest? Why haven't I done this, this, and this? Or you can use it as direction and motivation to say, that's where I'm going. And tomorrow when you look back, you can say, I didn't know any of this 48 hours ago, and now I've made the first step to investing in this or doing this. And so I don't think that self-worth has to be degraded by having impossible goals.
Oh, no.
It just gives you a direction to go to. And then every step that you raise that floor, to me, the
Huge
floor
gains.
is the gain that you're looking at. For me, that's a tell of whether I'm in the gain. Is my floor raising every single day? And I believe, my personal belief, is that I can raise the floor every single day for eternity.
I think
And
that's beautiful.
that is the concept of what good life is can I take a baby step today that I didn't have yesterday and always feel success, even though my goal is always going to change of where I'm actually going. So I love it. I think they are complementary, but I think that's one of the biggest issues in the world right now, in all honesty, is the gap mentality that we are constantly digesting and putting ourselves into.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, I mean, that's such a... It really is. I mean, I think when people compare themselves to others, when, the gap can really deflate you. I really use the future as a filter.
Yeah.
It just filters for me the direction I should go, and the direction, and also the things I'm doing now that I didn't realize were below the floor.
Yep.
Right. Like, and so I can look at things more honestly. I think that the future allows me to look at things more honestly, and then to find exponential paths,
Yep.
insane paths that you otherwise wouldn't think you could take, but you can. But yeah, the past is something that truly just gives a lot of beauty. It really does. And I think it's very healthy to be in the gain. And I think it's something that leaders should do more often, is point out the gains. Like, I think there's nothing that excites a team more, especially when going for impossible goals or going for scale, to have a leader go in and say, look at where we were a month ago. Or look at where you were a month ago. Look at how awesome it is what we're doing right now. Like, if you can be pumped on where you're at right now while still operating from the bigger future, dude, you're in the gold mine.
Yeah, I love it. So every single podcast, I end with the same 6 questions to every guest. It's so fun because you get to see, we've had people worth over $10 billion on the podcast, and we've had people that are just graduating college. And so it's fun to see the differences in the answers. I'm actually excited because I think we're going to see a different side of you. You are a very successful business person, and you write about business principles, but rarely use your own business as an example. So I'm excited to see. So I'm going to rapid fire these. We can go quick. All 6 can be in a couple minutes. But if you were to give 3 pieces of advice for someone starting their own business today, what business piece of advice would you give them?
I mean, I would probably just repeat everything we've said, but but to give 3 pieces of advice, the first one would be absolutely like choose a much higher goal, right?
Yep.
Like that's the starting point of everything, is we are shaped by our goals. And so I would, whatever their goal is,
10x it.
10 or 100x it, because that alone will force them to look at the majority of their plan for the next 5 or 10 years was actually the bad plan.
Yep.
So that's step 1. I think that one of the things that I would say, so I was listening to a podcast from Angela Duckworth. Angela Duckworth wrote the book Grit. And I really agree with what she said on this. She said that one of the things that she regretted in writing that book, because there's a lot of really gritty people who, because they're so gritty, they always just try to do things themselves. And they don't know how to get help. They don't know how to say, I don't know how to do this. Or they don't know how to delegate. They just, I'll do it myself. And so I think that learning how to, so number 1, set 10 times bigger, 100 times bigger goals. Number 2, be really open and honest as fast as possible when you're struggling, and get help and get better help faster. Like, learn how to get help. When I was writing even any of my books, when I was writing The Science of Scaling, I was toast. The book sucked for over a year. Terrible. It was really bad. And I reached a point where I realized I'm trying to do all this by myself, right? To the point of who, not how. As soon as I brought on the guy who is edited all my books with Dan, and I told him exactly where I was completely transparent, completely honest, and I think that this fits with having a high floor, immediately we were able to start solving the problems, right? And he's someone who can solve the problems, right? So go ask help from people who can help you. But trying to grit your way there without just openly, honestly saying, I'm stuck, I'm struggling, I need help, and then going and getting that help will really lower people's potential. I think very gritty people can have very low potential because they don't just know how to get help and be honest. So number 1, much bigger goals. Number 2, way more honesty, way more transparency, and seek help faster. Number 3, and I really probably should have just put this as number 1, is put God first. Yeah. Like, literally, number 1 is just my relationship with God enhances everything I do in business. It really does. Like, it improves why I do it. It improves who I do it with. It improves it's just putting God first speeds all good business principles up. It attracts the best who's to me. It helps me filter better. It helps me get over mistakes faster. It helps me forgive bad choices of others quicker. So just building my relationship with God, and actively praying for help and direction increases all strategic and leadership principles.
Love that. Okay, next one. If you were to start over from scratch, you had $5,000 to your name today, what business would you start? You had nothing to your name except for $5,000.
Nothing, no email list, no nothing.
No email list, no nothing.
I honestly don't know, to be honest with you. I would probably, as funny as this sounds, start writing online.
Yep.
Like I probably would.
Same path?
Yeah, maybe not the same path, because I don't know, but that was the main thing I really wanted to do, was learn and teach. And I don't think that I probably wouldn't have taken all the paths I've taken now. I might not get into coaching, for example. But I would probably choose different paths, business paths. But for me, my core is going to for me is learning concepts and teaching them.
Yep.
And so that's probably where I'd start still.
Do you think, this is a side tangent, but curious, do you think AI is going to take over your industry, and do you use it every single day in writing, teaching, researching, all that kind of stuff? Do you think authors are going to lose some of their hold on the industry because other people are going to be able to write books easier through AI?
No. In my opinion, I think I think AI is phenomenal. I think that I'm a big believer in use the best tools we can.
Mm-hmm.
We can have the tools we build just give us leverage.
Yep.
I mean, the fact that we have the internet, right? The fact that we can do podcasts and stuff like that. And so I use AI all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it helped me a lot with 10X, with the science of scaling. I don't know how it's going to change industries. I don't know how it's going to change writers and writing, but I think that the best creative ideas utilizing AI is very powerful. So it speeds the learning path up. But I still think that you have to build those innovative skills. Building new concepts, building new principles, building new ideas. If you're really good at innovating on your own, and then utilizing AI to help magnify and improve that is very powerful. But if you don't have that first skill, you can still probably get pretty far with AI alone, but your stuff's not going to stand out.
Yep, I agree. I was more just curious to get your thoughts on it and if you use it. Okay, I run an investing page. What's the worst investment you've ever made?
Ooh. This is when you can go in the gap.
Yeah. The next one's going to be what's the best. So,
but it's funny because I've made some bad choices. I say go in the gap because I remember when my wife and I first got married, it was 2012, 13, and we had $40,000 to invest in basically anything. And I think back on where Bitcoin was at back then. You know what I mean? I was but we put money in a very bad business. I didn't know anything. I had no good financial foundation. And so, it was one of those ones where it was friends and family member pitched us some offshore rice shipment business. And so we just put our money into it and never saw a dime ever again. And a person from church and them making promises and stuff like that. And I was just and I realized very quickly, I was okay, I got to be a lot smarter than this. I was that was it was a small price to pay, but a big learning.
Yeah, for sure. What is the best investment you've ever made?
So business investment, right?
Yeah.
Financial investment, right?
Whatever. Yeah. Business, financial, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say, it's always people. Yeah. People and relationships. Yep. When I invest in really good who's, I'm such a, so Tom Brady was someone who we wrote about in the Science of Scaling, and it's well known that Tom Brady took a lower salary so that he could build a really good front line to protect him and a really good backup front line because linemen get hurt all the time, blow out a knee, And why do people don't win Super Bowls? Because the quarterback's always rushed and getting his head chopped off. And so Tom knew that to win the game, he needed a really good team. And he was willing to take a little bit less himself and invest in a very good team. And, that's really good strategy. And it's also surprising strategy because no one else was thinking that way. And so whenever I invest in really good people, I get not only a 10x return. I mean, Richard Koch in the 80-20 Individual, and that book transformed my life. Like I read that after 10x is easier than 2x, and it would have been a different book, right? Really? Oh, much different book. Because in that book, he explains, and I completely believe it, that the best way to get to 10x is not, it's always through one person. I call super who in that book, right? The very leveraged who's. And so what I have found is when I invest in really good people, I get 100x returns fast. And even last week, I chose, but you have to be wise. It's not like you just invest in the wrong people, but I actively was generous with someone in my life who's been very influential. And by just giving them a little bit more, it wasn't that big for me. I'm already getting 10x returns from this guy because he feels appreciated and because he deserves it. And I'm just amazed at how much I can get by sharing the pie. It gets 10 times bigger so fast. Obviously you want to invest in the right people. Yeah. But oh my goodness. I mean, and when someone doesn't do that, and I'll be honest, I've been in situations where I wasn't invested in, even with Dan, to be honest with you, just sharing openly and honestly. Yeah. And when I was in a situation where I was massively growing his business and I didn't feel like he was willing to make an investment in me, it was just immediately I was just okay, I now know the situation. And so that's why I stopped writing books with him, to be honest with you. As much as I love him and loved collaborating with him. Yeah. And so when you don't invest in really good people too, man, you miss out. You miss out big.
Yeah. 1,000%. There's so many studies around that. If you overpay by 50%, you get 300% the output. There's so many different studies and concepts on it. And
goes with a high floor too.
Yep.
Because you just raise it up a little bit, and now all of that goes away, and now you're just off on the cream where it's all there.
I love it. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time. This has been a lot of fun. Phenomenal book. Excited for its release to kind of see what happens. I mean, almost every book you write is a massive success, and I have no doubt that this will be as well. I liked it because obviously I've read all your books. I've loved all your books. But there was pieces of every single one of them in this one. This was this is how we started the podcast. It was a holistic approach to business scaling that I think so many people are looking for. They go to every other book trying to find pieces of it. Yeah. And to me, this was a holistic approach that you rarely see inside a business. And so, well done. Thank you. If someone wants to get in touch with you, if someone wants to reach out to you, follow you on socials, email list, do you still write? What's the easiest way for someone to kind of get into your ecosystem?
Easiest way to get on the email list or whatever is just go to scaling.com. And if you want the audiobook for free, which we give it away, we actually got, talk about super who's. We got someone on our team who helped us get the audiobook rights so that we could give the book away. So it's scaling.com/audiobook. That'll get you on the email list. That'll give you the audiobook for free if you want the audiobook for free. That's the easiest way to stay in touch.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
If you loved this conversation, you're going to love my conversation with Jay Davis. Click right here to watch it.